Over the past week, one of the most consequential developments of 2025 unfolded quietly, receiving almost no attention from Western media, even though it has the potential to fundamentally reshape the global financial landscape for decades to come. The BRICS coalition, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has officially launched a new international payment system that allows 185 countries to settle trade in China's currency, the renminbi, bypassing the US dollar entirely. This is not a minor shift. It represents one of the clearest moves yet toward a multipolar global economy, challenging decades of US dollar dominance. I've been tracking BRICS' rise for years, and the momentum this group has built is truly extraordinary. More importantly, the number of nations actively seeking to join or cooperate with BRICS is growing exponentially. Across Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, governments are signaling that they want alternatives to the dollar-dominated system, motivated not only by economic opportunity, but also by the desire to avoid the political pressure and unilateral sanctions often imposed by the United States. This is a historic shift in the geopolitical landscape. Countries that were once considered peripheral players are now positioning themselves to play a central role in a new financial world order, and the data backs this up. Even major Western outlets like Bloomberg have started issuing warnings, projecting that BRICS Plus could dominate the global economy in the coming decades. By 2050, analysts estimate that the G7 countries will control only 18% of global GDP, while BRICS nations could control nearly 50%. Such numbers are staggering, especially considering that just a few decades ago, these nations were seen primarily as emerging economies with limited influence. The fact that even Western analysts are acknowledging this shift shows how serious and unstoppable this trend is becoming. The growing influence of China is central to this story. Its currency, long dismissed by global financial experts as incapable of going international, is rapidly gaining traction. For years, financial commentators insisted that the renminbi could never replace the US dollar because it was not fully convertible and lacked the liquidity and trust enjoyed by the dollar. Yet, over the past 5 years, Chinese banks have quadrupled their holdings of overseas renminbi loans, deposits, and bond investments, now exceeding 3.4 trillion RMB, or roughly $480 billion. The Bank for International Settlements recently reported that renminbi lending to developing nations has increased by $373 billion over the past 4 years alone. These figures illustrate not only China's growing economic reach, but also the increasing willingness of developing nations to place trust in the renminbi as a viable alternative to the dollar. We are already seeing concrete examples of this shift. In recent months, African nations including Kenya, Ethiopia, and Angola have converted major loans from US dollars to renminbi. Indonesia and Slovenia have announced plans to issue bonds in Chinese currency, while Kazakhstan's development bank sold 2 billion RMB in offshore bonds at an extremely low yield of just 3.3%. Yet these developments are virtually invisible in Western headlines, largely because they are occurring outside the traditional US sphere of influence. Step outside the Western media bubble, however, and it becomes clear that much of the global South views China not as a threat, but as a critical partner for long-term growth and development. China's engagement with Africa has been particularly remarkable. Earlier this year, at the height of Donald Trump's global tariff wars, China signed a zero-tariff trade agreement with 53 African nations. Never before has a rising superpower secured such coordinated support from an entire continent. The agreement covers a broad range of sectors, from agriculture and manufacturing to energy and technology, signaling a comprehensive plan to reshape global trade relationships. This is not just diplomacy. It's a strategic reorientation of the world's economic center of gravity. The trend extends well beyond Africa. Last month, Trump traveled to Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea in an effort to assert American influence in Asia. The White House described the visit as a major diplomatic success, but within 24 hours of Trump's departure, Southeast Asian nations collectively upgraded their free trade agreement with China. This is significant because ASEAN, the bloc of 11 Southeast Asian countries, is China's largest trading partner. Last year, trade between ASEAN nations and China exceeded $771 billion, underlining how integrated the region's economies have become. Singapore's Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong, emphasized that strengthening ties with China was a strategic priority, reflecting a broader trend across Asia toward closer economic cooperation with Beijing. What all of this points to is a quiet but profound shift in the global economic order. Countries across the global south are increasingly asserting their independence from Western-dominated financial systems. They are diversifying their trade, using alternative currencies, and forming new economic alliances that bypass traditional power centers. This is not a theoretical scenario. These developments are happening in real time, and they have the potential to redefine the rules of global trade and finance. The implications for the United States and the traditional G7 powers are significant. If these trends continue, the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency could gradually erode, reducing the geopolitical leverage the U.S. has long enjoyed. Meanwhile, nations that embrace China's economic model may gain more flexibility in their own domestic policies and international relations. The BRICS payment system, the rise of the renminbi, and the rapid adoption of Chinese-led trade agreements signal that the world is moving toward a more multipolar and interconnected financial landscape, one where power is more widely distributed, and the old rules no longer fully apply. In short, while Western headlines may have ignored it, 2025 is shaping up to be a pivotal year for the global economy. The BRICS coalition is no longer a peripheral player. It is at the center of a fundamental realignment in trade, finance, and geopolitical influence. Nations across the world are signaling that they are ready for a new system, one where they have greater autonomy, more options, and less reliance on a single dominant currency. The consequences of this shift will be felt for decades, and the countries that adapt first are likely to emerge as the major winners in the coming era of global finance. The recent upgrades in trade and financial systems across Asia are poised to remove many of the long-standing barriers that have slowed cross-border commerce. Supply chains are becoming more integrated and resilient, allowing goods, services, and capital to move more efficiently than ever before. This transformation is creating opportunities in new sectors such as advanced technology, renewable energy, and digital infrastructure, which are expected to drive the next wave of economic growth. To put it bluntly, the conventional narrative of the trade war led by Donald Trump is not unfolding in the way some expected. Instead of countries aligning with the U.S. as a preferred trading partner, global economies are increasingly looking for a reliable and stable partner. And in 2025, that role is clearly being filled by China. A striking example of this trend unfolded just 2 days after Trump concluded his tour of Asia. Indonesia successfully raised more than $842 million by issuing its first-ever Chinese yuan-denominated bonds, also known as dim sum bonds. Unlike traditional bonds issued in US dollars, these instruments are denominated in Chinese currency, but sold outside of mainland China to international investors. What makes this event particularly noteworthy is that Indonesia consciously chose not to borrow in US dollars. Instead, it opted for renminbi, and global investors responded with overwhelming demand. While the Indonesian government offered 6 billion yuan in bonds, investors placed orders totaling 18 billion yuan, 3 times the initial offering. This level of enthusiasm signals 2 things: a strong belief in Indonesia's economic potential, and a growing comfort among international investors in holding Chinese currency as a stable and viable form of investment. This shift is part of a larger transformation in the global financial system. A decade ago, renminbi-denominated bonds were largely ignored outside China. Today, they are increasingly used to fund major infrastructure projects, and investors are actively seeking these bonds for their portfolios. When viewed from a broader perspective, the implications are profound. China is emerging as a central financial anchor in Asia. Each time a significant country issues government debt in RMB instead of US dollars, it moves China's currency one step closer to becoming a genuine global alternative to the dollar, signaling a rebalancing of international financial influence. Data from SWIFT, the global financial messaging network, reinforces this trend. Over the past 3 years, the renminbi's share of global trade finance has quadrupled, reaching 7.6%, and making it the second most used currency for international trade after the US dollar. In 2016, cross-border renminbi transactions were negligible. Fast forward to the last 5 years, and quarterly transactions on China's CIPS, cross-border interbank payment system, network, have surged to nearly 13 trillion yuan. CIPS now processes over 52 trillion yuan annually, and connects approximately 4,800 banks across 185 countries, highlighting China's expanding financial footprint worldwide. Recent developments in the BRICS alliance underscore this global shift. Last month, China and South Africa, the latter a key BRICS member, completed the first-ever BRICS loan denominated entirely in Chinese renminbi. The funds will be directed toward large-scale development initiatives across Africa, including infrastructure, energy, manufacturing, water management, and education. This illustrates why many nations in the global south are increasingly willing to collaborate with China. Over the past 40 years, China has achieved unprecedented economic growth and modernization, providing a model that developing countries hope to emulate. The trend is not confined to developing nations. Shortly after Trump's visit to South Korea, the South Korean president met with Xi Jinping to sign a currency swap agreement worth 400 billion yuan, equivalent to more than $49 billion. This 5-year agreement allows China and South Korea to conduct trade directly in their own currencies, circumventing the US dollar entirely. Currently, approximately 1 in every 13 international trade deals is settled in renminbi. With the rollout of the new BRICS payment system, this share is expected to grow, reducing the reliance on the US dollar even further. For countries in the global south, this represents a significant strategic advantage. It offers them a more diversified and stable option for financing and trade, decreasing vulnerability to the volatility of dollar-denominated systems. At the same time, investors worldwide are showing increasing confidence in renminbi-denominated assets, further solidifying China's influence in global finance. Understanding these shifts is critical for anyone following geopolitics and global markets, as the decisions nations make today regarding currency, trade, and partnerships will shape the financial landscape for decades to come.